Okay, good. Welcome back. That's all of us here. Okay, good. So my name's Subhadramati, for those of you who don't know me. And yeah, I'm one of the regular team of this Dharma night class. And what we're doing, as we've already said, is it's a drop-in seminar, and the theme of the drop-in seminar is the White Lotus Sutra. So we've been doing that over the past few weeks, and we'll be doing that right up until the end of the year. This class, by the way, will go on all through the holiday season, just to let you know. I know we're advertising all the retreats and so on, but if you can't go on retreat, we'll be having Monday night all through at that time. So, right. Yeah, just grab yourself a place. Yeah. So what we're exploring is the sutra called the White Lotus Sutra, and I'm just going to do a little recap on what we mean when we talk about a sutra. So sutras come from, well, it's usually called a phase of Buddhism called the Mahayana. Mahayana means great way. Yana means something like way. Maha means great. And it's sort of, the Mahayana sort of set against the so-called Hinayana, which means lesser way. And sometimes these are talked about as phases of Buddhism, but probably it's better to describe them as attitudes rather than try to map them onto historical phases. And if we think of them as attitudes, then the Mahayana, or the Great Way of the Dharma, is when we realize in our Dharma practice that the welfare of other people is an integral part of our own development. And the sort of being who realizes this the most of all is the Bodhisattva. So a Bodhisattva, Bodhi means enlightenment, Sattva means being. A Bodhisattva realizes that the urge to develop spiritually is there in potential in all living beings. And with that realization, it's like a solidarity. And because of that solidarity, the Bodhisattva just can't ignore the plight of other beings. So it's like both things happen at the same time, as it were. Well, not even the same time, as they're both aspects of the one realization that there's this urge for growth in all life, and that urge to growth is completely connected with that urge in ourselves, as it were. So that's what the solidarity sort of springs from that. So a bodhisattva simply couldn't think in terms of only helping themselves, only saving themselves. It'd be completely against their nature. And I think, although that's like really, really lofty, the ideal of the bodhisattva is really, really lofty, I think, as ever, it's always important to know that each of us, I'm sure, have all had little glimpses of that. We've all probably got at least one person in our lives that, well, in a way, their happiness is bound up with ours, that we couldn't be happy if we saw them suffering, that if we knew they were suffering, it would be just second nature to help, yeah? We just want to help them. We wouldn't have to stop and think about it. We'd just think, I just wish I could do something for them. And, and that would go into action. Or, the other way around, if they were happy, it would be a joy for us. Yeah, their happiness would be a joy for us. Do people? I'm sure you have all got somebody like that in your lives, at least some of the time. Does that ring true? So I think that's good to know that that's in our experience, and then what we can see is for the bodhisattva, for the enlightened being, that's just sort of stretched out, as it were, to all beings all of the time. But we've got at least a glimpse of that in our experience. So that's the Mahayana attitude of Dharma practice, that sees that it's not only that it sees that it's not just about ourselves, it sees that it cannot just be about ourselves, that our own life is inextricably bound up with the lives of others, our own happiness, our own will for happiness is completely bound up with that of others. So so this sutra is a Mahayana sutra. It's concerned with that, the White Lotus Sutra, and it's a drama. This sutra is a drama, and the theme of it is enlightenment. And following on from what I just said, it's not just the Buddha's enlightenment; it's the enlightenment of all beings. And so Sangharakshita, Bhante Sangharakshita, our founder and teacher for those of us who are ordained, his commentary on this sutra, he called it the drama of cosmic enlightenment, for that reason. And when we're looking at any Mahayana sutra, there's lots and lots of them, and some particularly important ones. The key thing of note is to realise that there's more to Dharma life, there's more to practice. Well, actually, there's more to life, actually. Never mind Dharma life. There's more to life, but especially more to Dharma life than just simply grasping certain ideas or even practising certain techniques, if you like. That actually life, especially Dharma life, has to engage the imagination as well. So the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, they aren't like sort of textbooks, They're not trying to explain to us how to meditate. They're not they're not telling us about the 5 precepts or whatever. They're sort of inviting us to into the world of imagination. Even you could say they're inviting us to reimagine our own lives. That's what they're doing. And so in that way, this drama, yes, as Bhante said, is taking part in the whole cosmos, kind of out there, as it were, but it's also taken place within our own hearts. That's what, with any work of the imagination, we're trying to find the resonance within us. So that drama is the drama of cosmic enlightenment. It's sort of stage, as it were, is the whole cosmos. But it's also taken place in our own hearts. Or in a way, that's what we're trying to listen out for. If we were to read this actual sutra, we're not going to be reading it tonight. We're going to be sort of talking about it, as it were. Probably what we should be doing really is reading the whole sutra. We'd be saying, is that resonating with me? Can I listen for a resonance within my own heart? And I think actually it was interesting in the first half, Dayabhadra was really emphasising receptivity, and I think Dharmic receptivity's got sort of deeper and deeper levels to it. There's just the ordinary level of receptivity, like, when you're just, I don't know, having a conversation with a friend and actually listening to them. But I think there's ever deeper levels of receptivity. You could even say, I don't want this to sound too literalistic, so easy for it to sound literalistic, but what we're doing when we're listening to the Dharma is we're trying to let our ordinary mind be receptive to our deeper mind. Don't take that literally, but we're trying to tune into that. It's like, we can experience the archetypal realm, the imaginative realm, because we ourselves are on some level at least, archetypal beings. Yeah, that's if we weren't, we wouldn't be able to experience the archetypal realm. But because we're archetypal beings, we can experience the archetypal realm. We tend, like most often, we tend to identify sort of with the sense-based level, and think of this as real. But you could argue that the archetypal level, or the dream level, or the level we might access in meditation, if our meditation goes deep, is just as real. And in a way, well, not just we could argue, I think part of Dharma practice is trying to learn to sort of apprehend that reality. And we can only apprehend it with the imagination. I was going to share a little sort of experience of this. Is you never quite know whether you manage to put this into words, where I felt maybe this was one of the closest I got to the imaginative realm being as sort of real as the sense-based realm. I was on a solitary retreat, and I was meditating every day, as you do, and I was doing a particular practice that we do in the order, in the Triratna order. It's called the 6 element practice. And in this practice, you take each element, earth, water, fire, air, and even space, and you contemplate it, and you see if you can practice or get an experience of letting go your attachment to that element. So you see, well, this air, I say my breath, but is it really mine? And with not very much analysis, you can see, oh gosh, there's nothing about it that's mine. I didn't own it, don't control it. So can I let go of my attachment to it? So I was doing this practice every day. And whenever I do that practice in recent years, I always imagine myself being taught the practice in my imagination by the Buddha. So I always imagine that I'm, sitting with the other disciples in the presence of the Buddha, and the Buddha is teaching us all the practice, and with his kind of powers of, with his mind powers, he's able to teach each person individually the practice. So I feel like I'm personally being taught this practice by the Buddha, or guided in the practice by the Buddha. So anyway, there I was doing this practice, and of course one of the elements you're trying to let go your attachment to is the element space. So you sort of, here you are, you feel yourself in space. So we get so attached, don't we, to space? It's such a funny thing. It's so obviously not ours, but we immediately think, oh, well, this is my chair. If I had to walk in here this evening and somebody else was sitting up here, I'd feel a mild outrage of, that's my chair, that's my space. I'm meant to be up there or whatever. We very, very quickly make a space our own, don't we? I'm just in the process of moving house from one community to the other, so it's interesting how you feel, oh, that was my room for 12 years, and then it's not my room anymore. But before I know it, the new room, I'll be thinking, oh, that's my room. And if I was to suddenly turn up home, there was somebody else in it, again, I'd feel, no, that's mine. But it's silly, really, because of course we can't own it. So anyway, these are the reflections. So I was reflecting on the space element being not me and mine, not mine. And I was in this little cottage in Scotland doing this practice. That's where my sense-based experience of myself was. But in my imagination, I was in India 2,500 years ago, sitting in this grove of trees with the Buddha teaching me. And so when I came to this, contemplating this space element and letting it go, I just had this very strong experience, the strongest, as I said, had before. What's the most real, where am I most really? Because I'd been on solitary retreat for several weeks, so this sense of sitting with the Buddha in the forest grove that I was doing every day was very, very strong. And I did have a moment of, or more than a moment, of realising that it didn't feel less real than sitting in the cottage in Scotland. Do you see what I mean? I think it's important to start to experience that, because it's almost like we're trying to, it's like a corrective. We're so used to thinking, this is the real reality, this common sense reality. We're so used to privileging that so highly. We don't realise that there's other realities, as it were, that are just as valid, or just as less valid, if you see what I mean. They're just as true and just as untrue as this sort of sense-based reality. So this is what sutras like this are trying to do. They're trying to get us to enter this space of imaginative reality and see that there's just as much truth. Actually, there's more truth to be found there than in our so-called common sense reality of sense-based. Yeah. So that's a little bit of introduction. I'll just say a little bit about the sutra itself, and we're going to explore a particular parable. The sutra is mainly full of parables, and people that have been here in the previous weeks will have already explored a few: the parable of the burning house, the parable of the drunkard and the jewel, the parable of different ones are to come, the good physician and so on. And we're going to be exploring one of these tonight. But I just want to set the scene a little bit more. So I've set the scene in general of Mahayana sutras. So specifically, this sutra is set on Vulture's Peak. So Vulture's Peak is a real place in India, but actually, for our purposes, it's a mythological place as well. And sitting on the Vulture's Peak is the Buddha. And it's not the historical Buddha. It's the archetypal Buddha, and he's preaching to a huge assembly of not just human beings, monks and nuns, but also and lay people, but also gods and goddesses and so on. So he's preaching to this huge assembly, and he teaches for a while on very kind of esoteric teachings. And then he goes into meditation, and then from the middle of his forehead, a white light starts beaming out of the middle of his forehead. And everybody is kind of amazed, and they say, what could this mean? And somebody says, it must mean he's about to preach the White Lotus Sutra. And that's what happens. And the first thing that happens is the Buddha says, some of these people are already enlightened, by the way, and the Buddha says to the whole assembly, I've got a higher truth to teach you than you ever knew before. I've got a higher truth to teach you than you ever knew before. And who can remember what happens at that point? How does the assembly respond at that point? You can either, some people might remember, or you can just guess. So some beings enlightened, other people not enlightened, gods and goddesses. What did they do when the Buddha says, I've got a higher truth to teach you than you've ever learned before? Does anybody know, or can anybody guess? What do you think they do? What would you do? What if the Buddha said, I've got a higher truth to teach you? Ask what it was. Yeah, that'd be a good question. So some of them are probably really, really curious and went, great, what is it? So that's good. I think some of them probably did, at least in their minds, thought, wow, I wonder what it's going to be. Yeah. Did they all do that?
Some of them leave or something.
Did some of them leave? Yeah. How many left?
The enlightened ones?
Some of the ones that were already sort of enlightened, or enlightened in a limited way. 5,000 left. 5,000 left. So why did they leave?
They were somehow offended that there would be a higher teaching than they already.
Yeah.
They basically didn't accept that there could be a higher teaching.
So in other words, they didn't accept that they didn't already know everything. Yeah.
So it was the unenlightened ones
Well, in a sense, the Buddha was saying, that's a very good question, because if they were really enlightened, you'd think they would stay. But there was, I'm going to get myself into sort of sticky water here. The Buddha was saying something like, okay, even though you're enlightened, there's still further reaches of enlightenment. Maybe that's a way to put it. Yeah. And some of them probably stayed, but some of them, like Sanjay said, thought there couldn't be any higher teaching. In other words, they knew everything that there was already to know. Has anybody ever discovered that attitude in themselves? Yeah? Yeah. Sometimes we think, and what effect does it have when we have that attitude in ourselves? Yeah. Yeah, it closes you off to learning anymore, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly, it's a sort of understandable attitude, isn't it? Sometimes we don't really like change. We sort of say we do because we're Buddhists. We sort of say we want higher teachings or we want even change, but then we can be closed off to out of pride, I guess. Yeah, we think we know everything. And also out of resistance, because any new teaching, any new truth means we will have to change. And although we sort of pay lip service to change, we kind of often only want change in the way we want it. We're a bit of us kind of, no, I didn't mean that, Yeah. So that's interesting. We might just reflect on that. When have we been one of the 5,000 disciples who walked out without even waiting to hear what the Buddha had to say, and try and cultivate more that. Well, what is the teaching? That's really good, isn't it? Like just that receptivity of what is it. Okay, good. So that set the scene a bit. For some of you that'll have been a recap, but it's good to go over things. So I'm going to try a little experiment tonight. I hope it works. I'm going to try a little experiment tonight, which is I'm going to sort of depart from the sutra totally. We are going to talk about the parable of the magic city later on. But before we do that, we're going to do something completely different that's actually, in a sense, nothing to do with the sutra, but another way I hope it is. It is in my mind, and I hope it might be in your minds as well. Is I printed out some copies of a poem I'm fond of. I don't know if it's my favourite poem, but one that I think's got quite a lot to learn from. And I'm going to give it out to you and ask you to go into little groups, and one person in the group is going to read the poem, and then I'm going to ask you to just talk about it for 10 minutes or so in your group and see what you make of it, yeah? And then I'm going to bring you all back together, and then I'll tell you what I make of it. Oh, well, actually, maybe you'll have something to tell me that I hadn't already thought of, to remembering the attitude. So let's, what's best to do this? Maybe, tell you what, go into groups of 4 or 5, and I'll walk round and give you the poems. Just go into groups of 4 or 5. Okay, good. Good. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed your discussions. Maybe I'll just say for the camera, we're discussing New Foal, poem by Ted Hughes. Did you like it? Did people like the poem? Yeah. So there won't be time to go into every detail of it, that poem. But what, if I was to ask you what was the general sort of path or trajectory of the poem, could anyone say, what did you come up with? What do you think's happening? What's the story of the poem?
I would say it's cyclic. To me, it's cyclic in nature. There was a fell swoop.
There was a swoop.
Yeah, where you end up back where you started.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Interesting.
And to me, that's summed up as well in the last line about the moon. Goes through.
The moon. Okay. Interesting. Anyone else have anything different?
It's the formation of an identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything more than that? Okay.
At first, he's like a baby. He's still stunned. He has no idea what
Yeah.
it is. And then there's something a restlessness.
Yeah. So yeah.
Or wanting to know, where he starts questioning.
Yeah. Starts.
And then there's a point where it says, and suddenly he's up.
Yeah.
And that to me is the moment that you become.
The moment.
You become a knot on a string.
Become a novice. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's the forming the identity. I think that, should I tell you how I see this? I mean, I make a great deal of this poem in my Dharma life. How I see it does very much start off with this forming of an identity. And in a way, the whole first bit of the poem right down to here, the whole first about 8 verses, to me look like forming an identity. To me look like, in a certain sense, a sort of ordinary nature poem. You know, Teti was a great, he was a farmer in a way and was a great nature poet, yeah? So right up to this little foal being born, you know, find its legs standing up like its mother licking it, and sort of fitting himself together. I agree with both of you that that's forming an identity. And then, do you see on the third last verse it says, soon he'll be almost a horse. Yeah? Did everybody just see that? So I think, you know, that's the sort of natural world, isn't it? There's a little foal, gets born, soon he'll be almost a horse. Few poetic bits in the middle by Ted Hughes, by the poet, yeah? Yeah, so soon he'll be almost a horse, yeah? But what happens on the next line? Do you notice anything about the next line?
Capitalises the horse.
Yeah, I capitalise the horse. And what does that mean then?
Is it like it becomes a mythical horse?
Yeah.
An archetypical horse? Like
Yeah.
we believe to be horse.
Yeah, yeah,
Rather than him.
yeah. So that, I think that's what I think is happening. That now the horse is given a capital H, the little article a is taken away, so it's not a horse, small h. Horse is capital H. So I think what that means is there's no longer a horse, an ordinary horse, beautiful though it is in space and time, but we've got ideal horse, yeah, mythical horse. And then that's interesting because he wants only to be horse. That's all he wants, the foal, yeah, to be horse, to be mythical horse, yeah. So that's quite interesting because I think that suggests that somehow, it's a bit mysterious, isn't it? The little foal knows that there's something to be that's beyond just an ordinary horse. You see, this is where I think, in my mind, it gets a bit, it relates, I map it onto the Dharma, that somewhere we know we can be more than just a human being. We can be, sort of, well, for a Buddhist, an enlightened human being, yeah? Yeah, hang on a second, I just want to say a little bit more, yeah. So do people, does that sort of, can people see how I'm reading it like that? That he's wanting to be archetypal horse, yeah? And how is he moving towards that? What's he doing? The next line tells you, it's not a trick question. How is he moving from being ordinary horse to archetypal horse?
Pretending to be.
Yeah. What do you make of that word pretending?
It's almost like fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I think it is a bit, isn't it? Yeah. I remember puzzling over that word, because pretending usually means like make-believe or something. But then I realised it's kind of got another meaning, like pretend, yeah, which I think is a bit like that. It's pretend means to sort of stretch forward, yeah, to direct your course, yeah. And I think that's what the foal's doing. It's stretching forward towards what somehow it intuits. It can be, yeah, somehow it's intuited. It can be certainly more than a foal, but even more than a horse, yeah. It can be this capital H, archetypal horse. And that's all it wants, yeah. Somehow it knows, this little foal knows, that it won't be satisfied until that point. So there's a sort of positive dissatisfaction in the foal. He wants only to be horse. Yeah? He knows he can be horse. Somehow he knows he can be horse, and that's all he wants. And that's how the Buddha saw human beings. You know, if you remember the story, some of you know it. That the Buddha on enlightenment saw all human beings not as horses but as lotuses, and saw that every human being had the potential to be a fully open lotus. In the vision of the Buddha, some of the lotuses were just half open, some were, you know, still in the mud, but some were fully open. And the Buddha saw that every human being had the potential to be that fully open lotus. And what's more, they wouldn't be completely satisfied until they were, yeah? So there's a sort of positive dissatisfaction. Those of us that were here in the earlier session, Subhuti was talking about that. It's different from just ordinary unhappiness. It's the positive dissatisfaction of, I don't know, the artist, say, who knows there's still more. Something's not complete yet, yeah? It's sort of uncomfortable, but it's positive. It's like the grit in the oyster, to change the metaphor. Do you sort of see what I mean? Yeah? Do you see what I mean about it being positive yet uncomfortable? Yeah? So this little foal wants to be horse, and he's sort of stretching towards that, yeah. And in a way, if you map that onto us as potential Buddhas, we become a Buddha by acting the way a Buddha would act. So a Buddha would always be generous, always be kind, always be truthful. We tend towards that, we stretch towards that, we set our course by acting the way a Buddha would act, and that has an effect on our consciousness, a transformative effect on our consciousness, yeah? So we're making efforts towards being a Buddha. This little foal is making the effort till he's perfect horse. So what do you make of this notion of perfection? I think is this maybe brings us a little bit. This brings us back a little bit to the subject matter of the White Lotus Sutra. This idea of perfection. So when the Buddha was preaching to these assembly, some of whom were enlightened or supposedly enlightened, and some of them walked out. I think those walkers-outers must have thought that perfection was a static thing, a sort of once and for all thing, and that they had reached it. And so they didn't have anything else to learn, yeah? So I think that there's something, it's a little bit, you have to try and explain this quite carefully, because well, maybe not so good, but basically perfection, what I'm sort of putting forward is perfection isn't a static thing. That even a Buddha, in a sense, even Buddhahood, maybe this is a better way of putting it, even Buddhahood isn't an end point. At the same time, it's not that a Buddha's imperfect. You definitely can't say a Buddha's imperfect, okay? But what you can say, and this is what Bhante Sankaracharya, my own teacher, said, is that for something to be perfect, it has to be reaching beyond itself. You see, there's a paradox there. For something to be perfect, it has to be reaching beyond itself. It has to be constantly transcending. So you could even paradoxically say that for something to be perfect, it has to be imperfect. So my favourite description of enlightenment, I will come back to you, my favourite description of enlightenment is that enlightenment is a state of constant creativity, because that shows that it's not static, yeah? A Buddha would never ever fall back into greed, hatred and delusion. So there is something permanent in Buddhahood. It's permanently free of greed, hatred and delusion, the state of Buddhahood. But it's not permanent in the sense of static, because it's always reaching forward, finding new ways of expression and so on. Yeah. What was your question? Did you have?
I actually just felt a great compulsion to mention the way I looked at
Okay.
at the horse thing. To me, it kind of it was till he's perfect horse, then an unearthly horse.
Ah, yeah, we've not got to that bit yet, though. Yeah. Let me come on to the unearthly horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose what
Yeah.
interested me though was that it was through the fulfillment of his mundane nature,
Yeah.
just to be a perfect horse.
Yeah.
That was when he found the transcendental
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose the reason that interests me it was through being his total mundane self, his
Yeah.
earthly self,
Yeah.
and he wasn't striving
Yeah.
for me for
Yeah.
an unearthly
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
He was striving for the perfection of his earthly state.
Exactly. Yes.
But then the
Then
unearthly
something
as
else.
such
Something else.
surged
So-
through.
Yeah. So that's very good. That's how I would read it as well, and that's going to connect us with what I'm going to say next. So let's hold that. Yeah. So, but I just want to. I think that's right. I just wanted to pause over this enlightenment as continual creativity, because it's very, very important, and it's particularly been emphasised by Bhante in our tradition, the Triratna tradition. So I just want to see if that resonates with people. So what I'm talking about now is enlightenment as continual creativity, as paradoxically, for something to be perfect, it has to be reaching beyond itself. It hasn't to be walking out, you know. Does that seem true to people?
What does it mean to be perfect? So is the horse with capital H the same for every folk? Is that always
Yes. Well, what I'm
subjective? The being perfect, is it subjective, different for every person, or it's pointing to a certain specific model?
I think it's what I'm saying here is that perfection isn't something static. So therefore it couldn't be objective. Perfection is something active that's always reaching beyond itself.
And it stays open also.
Yeah.
But I guess it's kind of different for every person. Is that becoming your perfect?
Yeah.
yourself?
It can't be objectified like that, yeah. But at the same time, it's not just neither is it, or whatever anyone thinks is perfect. There is such a thing as enlightenment. It's not just enlightenment isn't just what anybody's idea of enlightenment is. Enlightenment is, in one sense, clearly defined. It's clearly defined as, a state that's completely free of greed, hatred and delusion permanently. That there's no more falling back. So I think that's important to have that precision on the one hand, as well at the same time as the continual creativity. Without the precision, you're in danger of just saying, well, enlightenment, it's all just subjective, it's just whatever we think it is, your truth's as good as my truth, da-da-da. Without the creativity, you're in danger of fixing it into it looks like this or it looks like that. Do you see how you do need both, I think, yeah? But what I'm just interested at the moment is this sort of, this paradox or this sort of sense of, maybe just bring it down to this more simple thing I'm saying, which is what Bhante said, is enlightenment, is continual creativity. Is that attractive to people, this notion of continual creativity? Yeah? Is it meaningful for people? Yeah. Yes?
In Subhuti's talk, he talked about like an artist or a poet, that they could be content with their work, but they should never be satisfied.
Yes. Yeah.
There's always a reaching.
There's always a reaching. Yeah, more. Yeah. Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? That distinction. Yeah, well remembered. Yeah. Can you just say it again so that?
That you could, an artist should maybe be content with their work, but not satisfied. Yeah, and that gives a real sense of that reaching. There's always reaching forward. Yeah. So enlightenment is a state of continual creativity, and then so you might think. If I hadn't given you the poem to read, you might think that Perfect Horse sort of was the end. But then, of course, this new thing happens, that something completely new comes into being, even a terrifying thing. Unearthly horse surges through him and coils his eyeball and his heel in a single terror, like the awe between lightning and thunderclap. I particularly like that. So there's not loads of time to go into that because I haven't even said the magic city, but I will say it in the last 5 minutes. And but what it shows is that we do the sort of work from our end, as it were. This is how I read it. And then something else happens. In a way, we create the conditions, if you like, for something completely new to come into being that, as you said, we had never striven for partly because we couldn't even imagine. Something we cannot imagine comes into being. And for me that is an analogy to how I imagine enlightenment, that we do something from our end as far as we go, but all we can do is be the lightning rod for something else to happen that can't be our doing, because we wouldn't know what to do. Enlightenment itself is something so beyond us. Yeah, and I think that gives a little flavour of it in this poem. The parable of the magic city is very, very simple parable. The Buddha says something like, say there was a group of travellers and they're going to the place of jewels, yeah? They're going to the place of jewels. It's a long, long way. They're being led by a guide and they're about to give up. Yeah, they just say, we can't go on. And the guide conjures up a magic city that's wonderful, and it's got water to drink, it's got like comfortable beds they can rest, it's got food they can eat and so on. And they all partake of that, and then they wake up refreshed and they think, oh, we're not going to give up after all, we're going to carry on. Yeah. So very, very simple parable. And I think what that parable says is we can't always have the furthest reaches in mind when we start off. That sometimes we need to just have enough to just get us started on the path, yeah, and just have enough to keep us going. So that's why I tie it in with the poem as well, and some of your interpretations of the poem. The little folk, doesn't have this whole kind of magic kind of thing in mind. He just begins with wanting to be a sort of grown-up horse in a way, and then when he's
As a star.
He
begins as a star.
He begins as a star. Yes, well that's yes. He begins as a star. Yeah. Well, let's we'll have to leave that aside. We'll have to leave that aside just now. I think to me that's Ted Hughes. That's the poet being poetical. Yeah.
I don't think it's the knowing already.
Yeah.
It comes into being.
Well, it could be, but I'm going to have to. It's just a poem. It's not the poem. Isn't the actual. The poem isn't the actual Dharma. Do you see what I mean? The poem isn't the actual Dharma. I'm just using the poem. So maybe it is. But let me just finish this Magic City, because I know I probably possibly confused things by bringing the poem and the thing. Let me just finish off, and then you can go away, and all new things might unfold from you. But what I think the parable is saying that connects with me with the poem is sometimes we need to just have the goal of just the next thing, yeah? But then, and that can lead us then to the next thing. But what we've got to be careful to do is not settle down in the city. That's what the travellers did, kind of go, oh yeah, we'll just stay here. We've got to allow that to lead us on, yeah? So maybe we do start as a star, In a way, I think the important thing is that we have a vision, and but also that we allow that vision to keep unfolding before us, yeah? We don't allow ourselves to think we've got there before we've got there. At the same time, we might need a little magic city of rest and, sort of gathering ourselves before we carry on. So, sort of, we need to let the magic city be something that draws us on, not something that we settle down in. Do you see what I mean? And that's why I was having the analogy with the foe. You want to start off with something to move towards, but then the very thing you're moving towards might lead you to something else, yeah? And that might be something. I know I certainly experienced that when I came to the Buddhist Centre. I never thought I was ever going to be a Buddhist, never mind, an ordained Buddhist, never mind, da-da-da. I just came along thinking, I don't know what I thought. I didn't really think much, actually. I just thought, oh yeah, I'll go along there and see what happens. But something unfolded before me. So I think the message here, parable, which is very simple, poem, which is, in this instance, possibly a little more complex, is to keep allowing where we think we're going to unfold before us, yeah? Not be one of the walker-outers, not to think, oh, I know everything there is to know. And that will challenge us, because it will call on us unfolding in ways that we hadn't dreamed of. It will call on us to perhaps turn to a direction that we hadn't thought of. So I think I'm going to have to leave it there. So hopefully that's given us something to think about. I think do keep reflecting on this. What is the nature of perfection in a way? And this thing that Bhante said, for something to be perfect, paradoxically it has to be imperfect. It has to keep unfolding. So we'll leave it there. We're going to be carrying on with the Sutra next week and right up until Christmas. Just say a little bit about the class just to end. So just what we've been saying at the end of the class of late is just that at the Buddhist Centre here, we're just trying to create a completely different kind of culture. We're trying to create a culture that's not based on exchange, that's based on generosity. So all the team are volunteers, all the teachers, we just volunteer because we like doing it. And if you want to join in with that culture, you can contribute in different ways. You could join the team. If any of you are interested in that, do let one of the team know. You can give financially, and I know some of you have, so thank you. If you haven't and you'd like to contribute, then the Dharma bowl will be there at the end. But all that's left for now is just if you pop your cushions away at the end, and then see you next week. Yeah, thank you.